The morning my daughter-in-law handed me a color-coded weekly chart, laminated, with my name printed across the top in bold. I felt something shift in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger. Not exactly. More like the slow, cold recognition of something I had been refusing to see. The chart was mounted on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a maple leaf. Cheerful. Domestic. Completely unbearable. "I put your schedule right here," my daughter-in-law Renata said, tapping it twice with her finger. "So there's no confusion." My son Kevin stood beside her, nodding the way he always nodded when Renata spoke. Not a nod of agreement exactly. More like the nod of a man who had learned that nodding was easier. I looked at the chart. Monday, school pickup 3:15. Wednesday, dinner prep, start at 4. Thursday, Olivia's swimming, drop off and wait. Friday, overnight, both kids. I was 63 years old. I had worked for 31 years as a bookkeeper for a construction firm in Barrie, Ontario. I had raised Kevin alone after his father, my husband Dennis, died of a heart attack when Kevin was 14. I had survived that. I had survived a great deal. And now I was standing in my son's kitchen in Oakville, looking at a laminated chart with my name on it, and I could not think of a single word to say. "It just makes things so much easier," Renata added. "You know how chaotic things get." I nodded. I said, "Of course." And I went home that evening and sat in my kitchen for a long time without turning on any lights. I want to be honest about something before I go further. I did not become someone's unpaid childminder overnight. It happened the way most things happen. Gradually, almost invisibly, one small yes at a time. When Kevin and Renata's first child, Madison, was born 4 years ago, I was thrilled. Genuinely thrilled. Dennis had always wanted grandchildren. He used to say, "Imagine June!" Little ones running around. He never got to meet them. Madison came into the world 18 months after we buried him, and holding her for the first time felt like something I couldn't quite name. Grief and joy pressed together until they were indistinguishable. So when Renata called and asked if I could watch Madison one afternoon, I said yes without hesitation. When Kevin asked if I could come over Saturday morning, I said yes. When Renata's maternity leave ended and they mentioned that daycare had a long wait list, I said yes to that too. 3 days a week, then 4, then quietly, without any formal conversation, 5. I did not complain. I loved those children. Madison with her serious eyes and her habit of organizing her toys by color. Owen, who arrived 2 years later, who laughed at everything and fell asleep mid-sentence. But love and exploitation are not the same thing. And I was beginning to understand that I had confused them for a very long time. There was a Tuesday in October. I remember it clearly because there was frost on the windshield that morning and I had forgotten my scraper. When Renata called at 6:40 a.m. "June, Madison's school starts at 8:15 and I have a 7:30 call I can't move." I was still in my housecoat. I hadn't had coffee. "What time do you need me there?" "Now would be great." No apology, no acknowledgement that it was 6:40 in the morning and the temperature was -11. Just the expectation, smooth and automatic, that I would come. I came. That same week, I missed a follow-up appointment with my doctor because Renata texted at noon. While I was in the waiting room, saying Owen had a fever, and could I please go pick him up from his playgroup, I stepped outside, called the clinic to reschedule, and drove across town to get him. I told myself it was temporary, that once they found a more stable childcare arrangement, things would settle. I kept telling myself that for the better part of 2 years. The moment everything changed happened on a rainy Wednesday in November. I had picked up Madison from school and brought her back to their house. I let myself in with the key Renata had given me years ago. Madison went upstairs to change and I carried her backpack into the kitchen. I thought the house was empty. Renata wasn't supposed to be home until 6. Then I heard her voice from the living room. I froze. Not deliberately. I simply stopped moving when I heard my name. "Honestly, Gwen, I don't know how we'd manage without her." That was Renata. A laugh from someone I recognized as her friend Gwen, who came over for wine sometimes. "Kevin's mom? She's over there all the time, isn't she? Every day, practically." Renata's voice had a lightness to it I didn't like. She loves it. She loves being needed. "You can't buy that." Gwen said something I couldn't quite hear. Then Renata laughed. "Pay her?" Kevin suggested it once. I said, "Why would we pay her? She's family. Besides, she's retired. What else is she doing?" I stood very still beside the kitchen counter. My hand was resting on the back of a chair. She never says no? Almost never. And when she hesitates, I just remind her that daycare is $3,000 a month and Kevin's job has been unpredictable. A pause. Then, lightly, "She always comes around." Something in my chest went cold and quiet. She knew. She had always known exactly what she was doing. This wasn't obliviousness. This was strategy. Calm, deliberate, efficient strategy. I was a line item in their household budget that they had found a way to make free. I stood there until I heard Madison come back downstairs. Then I put a smile on my face, because none of this was Madison's fault, and I helped her with her snack and her reading, and I drove home in the rain. I did not sleep that night, or the night after. Dennis had a habit, when I was struggling with something, of sitting down across from me at the kitchen table and saying nothing for a while. Just being there. He was not a man of many words, Dennis, but he was steady. He was the steadiest person I had ever known. I missed him so completely, in those weeks after November, that I couldn't always tell where the grief ended and the loneliness began. And I think that's part of what had made me so easy to take advantage of. When someone you love dies, you reach for whatever makes you feel necessary, whatever makes you feel like you still have a place in the world. Being needed had felt like belonging. I understand that now. About a week after I overheard Renata's conversation, I was going through some paperwork at home. I still manage my own finances carefully, an old habit from 30 years of bookkeeping. When I noticed a series of e-transfers I had nearly forgotten about. Dennis died with some medical debt, and Kevin had been struggling financially that first year. I'd helped quietly. A few thousand here, a few there. The furnace in their house had needed replacing. I covered half. Renata's car needed work. I sent something. Madison's preschool fees for the year when Kevin was between contracts. I paid without being asked. Looking at the full record of it, I felt slightly dizzy. Not because the money was gone. I was comfortable enough. But because I had believed, genuinely believed, that those contributions were between us. That Kevin knew. That it had mattered. I called Kevin that evening, not to confront him, just to talk. Somewhere in the middle of the conversation I said, "Do you remember when I helped with Madison's preschool?" Silence. Then, "I think Renata handled all that. Do you remember the furnace?" Yeah, I think so. Was that a loan? I thought we were going to pay you back. What about the car?" A longer pause. "What car?" I closed my eyes. He didn't know. He genuinely didn't know the extent of it. Renata managed their household accounts entirely. Whatever I had given, however I had helped, it had been absorbed and forgotten, and Kevin had been kept comfortable in his ignorance. That night, I made a decision. I opened my laptop. I had not taken a proper holiday since Dennis died. 3 years without going anywhere, without doing anything that was only for me. There was a trip I had always wanted to take. Dennis and I had talked about it for years. The Cabot Trail in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. The coastal highway, the cliffs above the Atlantic, the little fishing villages. We had meant to go when he retired. We never made it. I booked a cottage for 10 days. A small place near Ingonish, on the water. I paid for it before I could talk myself out of it. Then I closed the laptop and made myself a cup of tea. And for the first time in months, I felt something I could only describe as relief. I told no one. I want to explain why, because I have thought about it a great deal since. It wasn't deception that kept me quiet. It was the knowledge of exactly what would happen if I said anything. There would be a conversation. There would be concern, perhaps, or the performance of concern. There would be negotiations. Renata would produce the laminated chart and point to the dates that overlapped with my trip and explain, patiently, and with just a trace of reproach in her voice, why the timing was a problem. And somehow, the way things had always worked, the timing would always be a problem. There would never be a right time. There would always be a reason to wait. I was done waiting. The week before I left, Kevin called on a Thursday evening. "Mom, can you take the kids Saturday? Renata and I are looking at new kitchen counters." I paused for just a beat longer than usual. "I actually have some things on Saturday." A silence. "Things? Yes. Like, what kind of things?" I noticed, not for the first time, that my plans had never required an explanation. Only my refusals did. "Just some things I've been putting off." He sounded genuinely confused. "I thought Saturdays were usually good for you." "Not this Saturday." After we hung up, I sat with that small, uncomfortable victory for a while. It had cost me something. That pause. That simple no. It shouldn't have. But it did. Which told me, more than anything else, how deeply the pattern had settled into me. I left on a Tuesday in early December without fanfare. I told Kevin the evening before that I would be away for a few weeks. I did not give more detail than that. Away where? He asked. Cape Breton. Silence. Mum. It's winter. I know. Why didn't you say anything? I'm saying something now. What about the kids' schedules? I kept my voice even. That's something you and Renata will have to sort out. The quiet on the other end of the line was dense with things neither of us said. Then he asked, Are you okay? That question, the first time anyone had asked it in a very long while, nearly undid me. I will be, I said. I'll call you when I arrive. The drive to Cape Breton takes about 2 days from Oakville if you're not rushing. I stopped overnight in Amherst, Nova Scotia, in a clean and unremarkable motel, and ate fish chowder at a diner where the server called me Han and refilled my coffee without being asked. I sat there for an hour after I'd finished eating, looking out the window at the dark street, and felt something loosening in my chest. The cottage was small and faced the water. There was a wood stove and a good reading chair and a front porch where you could hear the Atlantic all night long. I had brought 6 books. I had brought Dennis's old hiking poles. I had brought the good wool sweater I'd bought in Stratford 2 years ago and never worn. The first morning, I woke up before 6, made coffee, and stood on the porch, wrapped in that sweater, and watched the light come up over the water. The ocean was pewter gray. Gulls moved above it in long arcs. There was ice along the rocks at the shoreline. I thought, Dennis would have loved this. Then my phone began ringing. It was Renata. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. A text. June, where are you exactly? We need to talk. Another. You can't just leave without warning. This is very difficult for us. Then Kevin. Mum? Please call me. Renata says she didn't know you were going. I put the phone face down on the table and went back to the porch. By that evening, there were 11 missed calls and a string of text messages. Renata's grew progressively sharper. You've left us in an impossible position. Did you even think about the children? This is incredibly selfish, June. Selfish. I looked at that word for a long time. After 31 years as a bookkeeper, I have an instinct for numbers. So I found myself, that evening, doing a rough calculation. The previous 2 years alone. Approximately 340 days of childcare, school pickups, dinners cooked, activities attended, at the going rate for a registered nanny in the Greater Toronto area, conservatively. I won't write the number because it made me feel things I wasn't ready to feel. And I was selfish for taking 10 days in Nova Scotia. I did not respond to the messages that night. I made pasta and read my book and listened to the ocean. The next morning, Kevin called again. This time I picked up. Mum! He sounded exhausted. I don't understand what's happening. I needed a holiday, Kevin. You could have told us. We could have figured something out. I've been telling you things for 2 years. Not in so many words. But I've been telling you. A long pause. The kids are asking for you. That hurt, the way he knew it would. Not deliberately, perhaps, but it landed. I miss them too. But I'm not coming home early. Renata had to cancel 2 meetings this week. I looked out at the water. I'm sorry to hear that. Mum, Kevin, do you know how many appointments I've canceled in the last 2 years because someone needed me? Silence. How many lunches with friends? How many evenings? How many things that were mine? He didn't answer. I don't think he had an answer. I'll call you at the weekend, I said. Give the children my love. What I didn't know, while I was standing on that porch in Cape Breton eating a clementine and watching a seal on the rocks below, was that Renata had been busy. I found out when my neighbor back home, a woman named Sylvia Chen, whom I had known for 15 years, sent me a message with a screenshot attached. The message said only, June, I'm so sorry. I thought you should see this. Renata had posted in the local community Facebook group, the one for families in our part of Oakville, a long, carefully worded post. There was a photograph of Madison and Owen at the kitchen table, looking small and sweet. Underneath, Renata had written about how hard it was to parent without consistent support, about family members who made promises and then disappeared, about how children needed stability, and some grandparents seemed to forget that. She hadn't used my name. She didn't need to. Everyone in that group knew our family. I sat with the screenshot for a long moment. Then I scrolled to the comments. The first few were sympathetic. Parenting is so hard. You're doing your best. Sending love. Then a woman named Deborah Kowalski wrote, "Didn't Kevin's mom take those kids practically every day? I've seen her at school pickup more times than I can count." The next comment replied, "I thought she cooked dinner for them every week." Another, "If someone's been helping that much, maybe they've earned a holiday?" The comments multiplied. A woman I didn't know wrote, "Grandparents are family, not staff." Another, "If the grandmother needed a break, perhaps the question is why she needed one." Someone tagged a mutual acquaintance. "Didn't June pay for the kids' activities last year? I hadn't told anyone about the money." Apparently, some things are simply visible to the people around you. Renata had expected sympathy. The community had given her something quite different. Kevin called that afternoon. He sounded shaken. "The comments are, people are saying things. Mom, I saw. Renata's upset." I waited. "People are saying she took advantage of you." I said nothing. "Did she?" His voice had gone quiet and careful. "Did we?" There it was. The question I had been waiting, without knowing I was waiting, for him to ask. "I need you to think about that yourself, Kevin. I can't answer it for you." That evening I opened my banking app and noticed something that made me go very still. A payment had been attempted from an old account I rarely used, one that had been connected to some automatic transfers I had set up years ago, during one of Kevin's difficult stretches. The payment was to a childcare agency. It had been declined. My account balance had dropped below the threshold I had set for automatic payments, which is the only reason it hadn't gone through. I called the bank the following morning. The representative confirmed that the payment had originated from a device connected to Kevin's household profile and old authorizations I had set up and never revoked. "Would you like to remove the authorization?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "All of them, please." I sat very still after the call ended. Not because I was certain of what had happened, but because the probability felt very clear. Renata had known about that account. I had mentioned it once, years ago, and somewhere in the chaos of my unannounced departure, someone had thought to use it. I was not angry, or I was angry. But underneath the anger there was something colder. The recognition that this had always been about resources. About management. I had been managed. Politely, efficiently, and with great affection performed at appropriate intervals. 2 days later, Kevin called again. He sounded different. "I've been going through some things," he said slowly. "Some of the bank statements from the past few years. And, Mum." A long exhale. I didn't know how much you'd helped. I thought it was smaller. I thought Renata had paid back most of it. She hadn't. No. His voice cracked slightly on the word. She hadn't. I let the silence sit. "The furnace? Yes. Madison's preschool fees? Yes." He stopped. "There were more things, weren't there? Things I didn't know about." "Yes, Kevin, there were more things." I heard him breathing on the other end of the line. I had not wanted this for him. Whatever had happened between me and Renata, I had not wanted my son to sit in his kitchen, learning that his mother had been funding his life without his full knowledge, and that his wife had known and said nothing. "I'm sorry," he said finally. It was a different kind of sorry from the ones before. Smaller, quieter, less defensive. "I know," I said. "I'm going to come, Kevin. I'm coming to Cape Breton. Not to drag you home. I need to see you. Can I come?" I looked out at the water. A fishing boat was moving slowly along the horizon. The light was the particular pale gold of a December afternoon in Nova Scotia, and it was very beautiful. "Yes," I said. "Come." He arrived 2 days later on a Friday evening. He drove, which meant he'd been in the car for 13 hours. When he pulled up to the cottage, he looked pale and tired, and older than I'd expected, the way children sometimes do when you see them outside their familiar context. I made him tea. We sat at the small kitchen table. "Renata doesn't know I came," he said. I looked at him. "She thought I was going to bring you home." He wrapped his hands around the mug. "I told her I was coming to see you. That's different." We sat quietly for a while. Outside, the wind was picking up off the water. "I should have paid more attention," he said finally. "Yes. I let Renata manage things, and I thought that meant everything was fine. I didn't ask questions I should have asked." "No, it's not an excuse. I know it isn't." He was quiet again. Then he said, "Do you know what I kept thinking, driving here?" I waited. I kept thinking about after Dad died. You held everything together. The estate, the paperwork, selling the car, all of it. You got on with it, and I thought that meant you were fine. He looked up. I think I've been thinking that ever since. That you're fine. That you just get on with things, and you're fine. My throat tightened. I forgot to check, he said. I just forgot to check. That was the thing that finally made me cry. Not the charts. Not the financial transfers. Not Renata's Facebook post. My son saying, quietly and without excuse, I forgot to check. We talked for a long time that night. About Dennis. About the years since. About what I had given and what I had needed and how completely those two things had come apart. At some point I told him about the bank notification. About the attempted payment. He went very still. She knew about that account. I mentioned it once, a long time ago. He didn't say anything for several minutes. He stared at the table then. I'll talk to her, Kevin. No, Mum, I'll talk to her. The following evening, Renata arrived. I had expected anger. I'd prepared for anger. What arrived instead was something more unsettling, a version of Renata, who was carefully, precisely composed. She sat across from me at the table with her hands folded in front of her and her voice modulated at a frequency designed to sound reasonable. I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding, she said. Kevin said nothing. He was watching her in a way I hadn't seen before. I never meant to take advantage of you, June. I hope you know that. We relied on you because you were there, and because you wanted to be involved. I did want to be involved, I said. Right, so I wanted to be a grandmother, not a nanny. She blinked, just slightly. There's a difference, I said. I think you know there is. Silence. Kevin looked at her. Renata, the account. Her expression shifted for just a moment. I don't know what you mean. The payment attempt from my mother's account to the childcare agency. That must have been an old authorization. Some automatic. Was it? The room was very quiet. Outside, the ocean was steady and indifferent. She looked at her hands. I panicked, she said finally. You were gone and we had no coverage, and I thought, it's set up automatically, it's my account, I said. Without asking me, I know. The composure cracked, just around the edges. I know. I was wrong. Kevin said, how much did my mother give us? Total. Over the years. She didn't answer immediately. Renata, I don't have the exact. Approximately. Her jaw tightened. I don't know. I'd have to go through everything. She has it written down, Kevin said quietly. She already went through it. I reached into my bag and placed my notebook on the table. Renata looked at it the way people look at things they wish weren't there. Kevin opened it. He turned the pages slowly. Renata watched him. Neither of them spoke. Eventually she said, I never told you to give us any of that. No, I said. You didn't. But you didn't tell him either. The silence after that was very complete. Kevin closed the notebook and set it down carefully. He looked at his wife for a long time. Why didn't you tell me? She didn't have an answer, or she had one she couldn't say out loud. Because it was convenient not to. Because as long as Kevin didn't know the full picture, no one had to feel guilty. I provided. She managed. He remained comfortable in the middle. I said, I'm not interested in punishment. I want to be clear about that. I'm not here to make anyone feel terrible. Both of them looked at me. But I need some things to change, and I need you to understand why I'm asking for them. I told them what I had decided, calmly and without drama, sitting at a small table in a rented cottage with the Atlantic outside the window. I would no longer be available on a fixed schedule. I would see the children when I chose to, and I would say yes when I genuinely wanted to say yes. I would not be consulted about their household logistics. I would not provide financial assistance without a direct, explicit, two-sided conversation, with both of them present, not just Renata. And I had made one other change, I told them. Before I left Oakville, I had visited my lawyer. My estate planning, which had been simple and generous to a fault, had been restructured. My assets were now held in a trust, directed ultimately to Madison and Owen, to be administered when they were adults. Not immediately, not punitively, but clearly, and beyond informal renegotiation. Renata's expression changed. Kevin looked at the table. I want the children taken care of, I said. I've always wanted that. This ensures it. It cuts us out, Renata said. It makes sure the children are cared for directly. That's different. She opened her mouth and closed it again. Kevin was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I think that's fair, Mum. She looked at him. He didn't look back at her. Renata left the next morning. The drive back, she said, was long and she needed to get home to the children. She hugged me at the door. A careful, brief hug, and said she hoped we could move forward. I said I hoped so too. After her car disappeared down the road, Kevin and I walked along the shore. The tide was out. Frost had silvered the seaweed on the rocks. Our breath made small clouds. She's not a bad person, he said after a while. I know, but she stopped seeing you. Yes, I stopped seeing you. I didn't say anything. I keep thinking about what you said on the phone. That you stopped feeling like family. He picked up a flat stone and held it. That's on me. Whatever Renata did or didn't do, that part is on me. Yes, I said. It is. He threw the stone. It disappeared into the gray water. What do I do now? Start paying attention, I said. That's all. Just start paying attention. We walked back to the cottage, and I made lunch, and we talked about ordinary things. The drive up, what Madison had said when he left. A television program Owen was obsessed with. Normal things. The kind of things a mother and son say to each other when they're beginning, carefully, to find their way back. I stayed another 5 days in Cape Breton after Kevin left. I hiked the Cabot Trail in December. Not the summer version with crowds and camper vans, but the winter version, which is quieter and stranger and more beautiful than I had imagined. The highway curves along cliffs above water that is cold enough to kill you and lovely enough to make you forget that. I stopped at a lookout near Pleasant Bay and stood for a long time in the wind, looking out at the Gulf of St. Lawrence. I talked to Dennis the way I still do sometimes when no one can hear me. I told him about the chart on the fridge and the cottage, and Kevin's face when he turned those pages in the notebook. I told him about the seal on the rocks. I told him that I had booked, on a whim, a trip to Portugal for April. That I was learning watercolor painting at a community center in Oakville, and I was not good at it yet, but I was improving. I told him that I had remembered. Somewhere on that drive, something he used to say. He said it whenever I was exhausted and overextended and running on fumes for everyone around me. He would catch my eye from across the room and say quietly, "You're allowed to be a person, June." It was the simplest thing. I had always dismissed it too quickly. I drove home on a Wednesday. The house was cold when I walked in, the way a house is after 2.5 weeks empty, and I turned the heat up and unpacked my bags and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. 3 days later, Kevin brought the children over. Madison ran in first, as she always does, and threw her arms around me. Owen followed and pressed his face into my coat. I held them for a long time. Kevin stood in the doorway watching, and when I looked up at him, he smiled the way he used to smile when he was small. "Hi, Mum. Hi, love." We baked shortbread that afternoon, the 4 of us, and Owen got icing on the ceiling somehow, and Madison taught me a song she'd learned at school that made no sense. And by the time Kevin took them home at 6 o'clock, I was tired in the good way. The way that means you spent the day doing something that actually mattered. Renata and I are careful with each other now. Polite, measured, respectful. Not warm. Maybe not ever warm. But we both understand where the edges are. She no longer sends schedules. I no longer pretend I don't have a life outside that kitchen. There is a photograph on my mantelpiece that I put up when I came home from Cape Breton. Dennis and I at Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia, taken on our honeymoon in 1985. We are young and ridiculous and laughing at something off camera. I don't remember what. I look at it sometimes when I am getting ready in the morning, and I think about the version of myself who stood in that kitchen holding a laminated chart, silent, compliant, certain that love required disappearing. And I feel something for her that is close to tenderness. She was doing her best. She had forgotten for a while that her best was allowed to include herself. I haven't forgotten that again. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt yourself becoming smaller to fit into someone else's life, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, please share it with them. Because sometimes the most important reminder isn't that things get better. It's that you are allowed to take up space. You always were.